Hey guys, this is sebchoof here. This is my very first episode of my podcast called Realm Relapse, a podcast about Realm of the Mad God and other Realm-like games. Before I begin, quick thank you to my patrons who make all I do possible. If you'd like to consider supporting, there's a wide range of benefits for each tier and a link down below. And what better way to start this podcast than with the man who co-created Realm itself, Rob. How's it going, Rob?
Hey there, sebchoof. It's really great to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. Just a bit of an intro. Rob did start working on Realm in 2010, right? I know that's when it was in public beta. Or was it before then?
Yeah, 2009
Oh,
actually.
2009. Oh, wow, perfect.
Yeah, the very end of it.
Oh, great. And yeah, the game came into public beta in 2010 and then had a full release in 2011. What made you want to make Realm in the first place?
We had this company, Wild Shadow, and that was founded by me and my friend, Alex Carabas. And we had been a company for a couple of years, starting in maybe 07, 08, something like that.
Yeah.
And we had made various games and demos and things. And we had both played a lot of MMOs, but we were disappointed in the way MMOs worked. They seemed kind of boring. They didn't really live up to the potential that we thought you could get from a massively multiplayer online game. It really was born out of that. We had done a few demos before that, but when Realm came about, it was the result of a contest. Are you aware of this story with the assembly contest?
Yeah, I forgot what the website was called exactly.
Right. TigSource was the name of the website, and they had come up with a competition called the Assembly Competition. It was going to be a 2-month game jam, and in the first month, it would be the artists and the sound designers and musicians would come up with game assets, but they wouldn't make a game with it, and they would all be judged on how good those assets were. And in the second month, that's when the game designers and the programmers would come in and actually make games, but you were only allowed to use the assets from the first half of the contest. What happened was Alex had noticed that this contest was going on, and he got completely inspired, just inspired by a set of sprites made by a guy named Oryx.
Oh, well,
And
yeah.
Yeah, it was hundreds of little 8x8 pixel art dudes, characters, goblins and fighters and all this stuff. So he got totally inspired, and he's like, Rob, we got to do this thing. We can make an MMO, the one we wanted to make, and it'll be like this. It'll have these rules, and it'll be cool. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. So for a month, we worked like crazy in December of 2009, and it came out in 2010 after a month of work.
That's such a great origin story. Yeah. I didn't know that it was someone named Oryx who actually made the sprites. Wow, so is that where the name came from?
Well, yeah, obviously. But here's the kicker. We didn't know this at that moment, but he worked at Bungie. The guy's name is Chris Barrett. You can actually look this up. He's now the game director of Destiny 2, is on the board of directors of Bungie. The dude's a bigwig.
Yeah, wow. I remember doing a bit of research and seeing an interview you did recently on Reddit and mentioning that it's something from Destiny 2.
Yeah.
This is another question that I forgot to run by you. Just asking if you had any previous game development before starting work on Realm.
We started Wild Shadow with no previous game development experience, at least nothing professional. But we had spent a couple of years as Wild Shadow building various demos and little games, none of which amounted to a whole lot as we tried to learn how to do game development. It was something that we had both really wanted to do, for most of our lives, but we were busy with school and with jobs and work and stuff. It was a couple of years of experimentation, and, none of those things really amounted to very much, and that, was a little frustrating, and we were not really sure whether, game development was going to be a thing we could actually, make happen. But then the contest came along, and Alex had this fantastic idea for how to make Realm, and we reused a lot of code that was lying around, and I guess most of the rest of the story.
Yeah. Oh, that's so awesome. So you said that you were inspired from MMOs, or they didn't go exactly as you wanted them to, the ones that you were playing. One of them was World of Warcraft. Was there any other inspirations that you had for making Realm of the Mad God?
Yeah. So, you mentioned MMOs. It felt like those games should have been much more than they were, but they just seemed very boring. So, I do not claim any credit for the design of Realm of the Mad God. That was Alex's design. Now, I did...
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, he just came up with it. It was incredible. He's like, Rob, we're going to make this game. It's going to be like this. And I'm like, okay. and we made it. Part of the unique appeal of Realm of the Mad God, particularly at the time that it came out 10 years ago, was that, it was something really brand new. Like the idea of permadeath and an MMO, it seemed crazy to me. I was one of the guys working on it. It was kind of unique because, nobody else was doing that. And that's one of the things that we wanted to do in this game. We wanted to, to make it completely co-op and, have the permadeath and, all of the loot sharing and XP sharing. Although all those ideas were new at the time, we kind of wanted to do the opposite of what a lot of MMOs were doing. A lot of the inspiration came from a game like, Zelda, where you're throwing your sword around, or Gauntlet. Maybe these are, really old references, but Gauntlet was an old 80s arcade game where it was co-op. It was 4-player co-op. And, again, you were walking through a dungeon, but throwing your swords and spells and stuff around, just like you do in this game, in Realm. And Diablo, a game where there's lots of enemies all around, and you shoot and kill them, and they all drop loot, or, many of them do. Those are the types of inspirations that we brought from. If you take all of those types of games and then kind of try and smush them into an MMO, maybe that's how you would describe Realm.
Oh, awesome. It's always been so great because when Realm of the Mad God started, because it was one of the only browser-based MMOs, is that right? Like the only other ones that come to mind is like old school RuneScape.
Yeah, there had been a few other prototypes, but, they were not action combat the way Realm of the Mad God was.
Yeah.
And, that's another idea from MMOs, that combat, seemingly has to always be very boring, that we wanted to subvert. We wanted to do the opposite of that. And so, Realm, obviously, it's a game about dodging and shooting and trying not to be dead at every single moment. And that is just not a thing that MMOs do.
Yeah, exactly. And still to this day, there's no like mainstream MMO bullet hell games where like the action is so constant. Hopefully that comes in the mainstream soon. What was the most difficult part of creating Realm of the Mad God? Was there like anything in particular?
To me, the real struggle for Realm of the Mad God was the couple of years that came before, where we were building games and game demos and trying to see if these were going to be fun and trying to see if we could get an audience or something, trying lots of ideas because we wanted to innovate, but having none of them really stick. And that was the hard part. And then when it came time to do Realm, like I say, it was done over a period of a month. The project was sprung on me. The ideas were told to me a week before we had to get started.
Yeah.
So then the bell rang and we got started. We coded like crazy for a month and then it was out. So the actual making of Realm was not that hard. The hard part was what came before. But then when I think about it, all of that struggle for years before we came out with Realm, that's what made it possible to get Realm out in a month, because we took the skeletons or the code, we ripped the guts out of so many of our other demos that we could just kind of glue Realm together very quickly, because we had made MMOs before and we had made 3D clients in Flash before. And so it was possible to just take all that code, throw it together and, wrap it up with a bunch of duct tape and look, it's a bullet hell MMO with permadeath. Look what we made, everybody.
Oh, that's so awesome. I can't wait to ask the same question, except with the next two games, because this was your first, so I'm sure it was the toughest by far, but we'll get to those a bit later. What was your favorite memory about working on Realm?
That one crazy month, I will always remember that because we were on a mission. We had to take apart the corpses of our previous projects and rip out all the best parts and glue them together with all of this new art that totally inspired Alex and, new rules and try to do something on a deadline. And that was a pretty crazy experience that I'll always remember. But, one of my favorite things about Realm was when we first got trains going. When we first got 10, 20, 30 people all in a big mob fighting monsters, we were like a big ball of bees that exuded bullets out all sides. And monsters were falling, loot was dropping, we were grabbing stuff. Everybody was doing this literally for the first time. The people that were working on the game, we were in these first trains, and the people that were doing it were in the first trains. Of course, I didn't know who those people were. They were just randos on the internet, right? But that was kind of an amazing experience to see this behavior that emerged. We didn't design it thinking that we'd get a big ball of players shooting bullets everywhere, dropping loot as we rampage across the countryside. But that's what came out of it. And, that was an amazing feeling to see this brand new thing that had never really been seen before. I think that was pretty amazing. That was cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Was that during the beta or after the full release, when you started having swarms of players?
That happened right from the beginning. We put it out in early January because that's when the contest deadline was. And because there was a large audience of people for the contest, we actually got a lot of players because people were constantly being shown how to get to the game by checking back in on the contest. And so we got a lot of players, a few at first, but it, gradually ramped up to where we had 30, 40 people in the game. And, these trains, they just kind of spontaneously formed. It's not like someone was saying, all right, everybody get together, and it really was a consequence of the rule set. It's all completely co-op. drop. If you get a kill, anybody else standing nearby you gets the XP for the kill. If an enemy shoots a bullet and it hits one guy, well, that bullet is gone now and it can't hit other guys. And so you are protected in the swarm and you get lots of rewards, in terms of XP, and loot was dropping. I don't think we had loot sharing at the very beginning, but we added it very quickly where loot got duplicated for everyone. When a loot bag dropped, the first person to get there was the one that got the loot. If you grabbed the loot out of it, that's a slightly antisocial mechanic that we got rid of. I think it was pretty quickly we got rid of that.
And I just had a perfect question come up, because a lot of people don't actually know that the peak player count of Realm was actually around the time that you were working on it. Realmize said that it peaked around then. 100,000 players were logged in within a 2-week period, and around now is like 50,000 or 60,000, not sure about the exact number. How fast did you see that growth? Because that must have been crazy.
Let's see. Let's think about the growth. So this is the first time I'm hearing the number you said, 100,000 in 2 weeks?
Okay, like in a 2-week period. So like that's how they determined an active player?
I just hadn't heard that number before. That's interesting, but it actually kind of fits with the number that I did know, which was we had about 15,000 concurrent players at one point, logged in at the same time. Like I say, first we had 5 people, then 10, then 30, and it kind of grew relatively steadily, but I believe the biggest period of growth was after I personally had left the project, and this would have been in 2012, just before the Steam release. I believe there was a lot of hype going on. I believe at the time, one of only a small number of MMOs on Steam, so there was even a little hype associated with that. The rest of the team after I had left, it was about maybe 9 months after I left, I would say, there was a big ramp up in hype just prior to the Steam release, and this was beneficial to us just prior to the sale because we could point to some really good numbers, both in terms of absolute numbers of players, which is fantastic, but also in terms of revenue, which was, so that helped us, grease the skids on the sale.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I didn't know that. And Realm was acquired by Kabam in middle of 2013. Is that right?
My remembrance is 2012, but this is a long time ago. So.
Okay. Okay. There can be a wide variety of numbers on the internet, so yeah, I'm not sure if I got the right number.
Oh, me neither.
Was that around the time that you said that the amount of players were growing to a high point?
Yeah, right. As far as I remember, the sale and the peak of players occurred at about the same time, which, of course, if you're the seller, that's very beneficial.
Was there any plans that you had for Realm that you were really excited for but just didn't get around to?
I'm going to say no, and the reason for that is because both Alex and I considered ourselves to be innovators or inventors. That is, we're in it for making a new thing that didn't exist before. We wanted to make something out of nothing, and that's where the thrill is for us. That's where our motivation is. Once the thing has been invented and it's no longer nothing, now it's something, then it's less interesting, definitely personally for me. And there are people that are much more motivated and are actually much better at growing a small thing into a medium-sized thing and growing a medium thing into a large thing than I would ever be. So both Alex and I, once we got toward the end of the sale, were looking to move on to other projects, to invent new things, to come up, to innovate some more, and coming up with yet another dungeon and, yet another class and yet another set of items that can drop. For us, it's not as interesting as coming up with the game from nothing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, growing a game itself would have its own set of challenges for sure. We had this question in the Discord. For those that are listening, you can actually suggest questions in the Discord and I might use them for future podcasts. If the person in the podcast does like them, and you seem to have liked this one, was Wild Shadow happy with Kabam's purchase, or was it bittersweet? Especially after seeing how little effort they poured into the game after the acquisition.
From a certain point of view, yeah, we were definitely happy with the purchase because, like I said, we wanted to move on to new projects. Unless if we have to, continue to maintain and update Realm, then that's not going to happen. Or if we just let Realm sit around and we didn't update and maintain it, then Realm would die because without new content, people would drift away. So from that point of view, we were very happy to sell it because we needed to. It was time for us. But then from a health of the game perspective, I understand that people were like, oh no, Kabam, those guys, they blew the whole thing and they were terrible at it. I would kind of say the opposite because, like I say, we were not really equipped to take the game to the next level. Temperamentally, we were not equipped to do it. And they were. It was a good place to hold on to the game and continue to pour some resources into it. Now, did they do the right thing? That I don't know. Some have argued that the introduction of pets by Kabam was what saved the game financially, but I have no insight into whether that's true. But, then the subsequent sale to Deca, the game is still around. How many years? It's been 13 years since we started working on it, and it's still around. And, I can't say that would be the case had we held on to it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Everyone says that Deca saved the game, which they most definitely did by porting it to Flash because it's no longer supported, but not many people might consider that Kabam also saved the game by adding perths.
Yeah, right, yeah. I've heard there were times that they didn't put a lot of resourcing into the game and it, kind of started to wither a little bit, but it's still alive and they didn't kill it, right? They could have just killed it, but, they passed it along to the right people.
Yeah, exactly. In the beginning, it was quite interesting how much effort they put in, because if people did a bit of research, you can actually see that they even went out of their way to make a podcast about the game, which I only found out about recently, which is weird. I might get around to listening to all of those because it's a nice relic of the past. And yeah, I do like some of the additions they made to the game, like Mad Lab is still a dungeon in the game that's unchanged and people aren't complaining about.
Right.
But something really interesting is you actually started working on a brand new game almost right away on Flash as well, very similar to Realm. It's basically like a Realm of the Mad God except with tanks. It's called Grid 12. It became playable in middle of 2013, is that right?
Let's see. I started working on Grid 12, I want to say right early in 2012, and we did release it in the end of summer of 2012, I believe. We, made the beta playable, online. And it's a Flash game, so you can just go to grid12.com or whatever it was, and you can play.
Did you start working on that while you were working on a Realm at the tail end or afterwards? Or because it sounds like there wasn't much time between, if there was any.
I had left the Realm project sometime in 2011, maybe in the fall of 2011.
Oh, geez. So yeah, not too much time between.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I was still a part owner of the company, but I was not still actively working on Realm of the Mad God.
Yeah. So what was your inspiration for making Grid 12 in the first place?
I guess I really like the idea of co-op MMOs and browser game. Co-op browser MMOs. And it's actually not the first time I had made a co-op browser MMO game based on tanks. One of the projects that we worked on during that period before Realm came out was a co-op browser MMO project called Steel Chaos that I had worked on by myself. Yeah, and it's the idea was you would just go to that website, you would jump right into a tank, and with whoever else was playing, you would fight enemies and in your tank, grab loot, level up, that sort of stuff. And in fact, the server for that game, when it came time to make Realm, what I did was I just ripped out all of the code that made Steel Chaos, and that became the Realm of the Mad God server. And I mean, who knows? It could be, I don't know what's going on with Deca, but it could be that code still exists and is running as the server right now in Realm of the Mad God. I don't know. So it could be that code that I wrote back in 2007 for Steel Chaos, a game that no one has heard of or really played except for me, is that code still running in the Realm server? I don't know. It's possible.
You would have had a bit of an easier time after making that game before Realm, or at least working on it. What was the most difficult part of creating Grid 12? Was there any significant challenges that was unique to that game that you didn't experience with Realm?
From my point of view with Realm, I was handed all of the art by Oryx, and I was handed the game design by Alex. He just kind of came up with it. That seems like a black magic voodoo thing to me, man. It was an amazing design, and he just kind of came up with it all by himself all of a sudden. And actually, those two were the biggest challenges in Grid 12. The art, I did a kind of a glowing vector kind of art style, reminiscent of maybe some original arcade games like Asteroids. I think it kind of didn't work very well, in hindsight, to be honest. It was kind of ugly. And then the other thing is the game rules. I came up with game rules. Again, I'm trying to innovate. And the stuff that I came up with, it just wasn't as successful as Realm was. And from my point of view, the code and the technology and stuff, that worked out fine. But that one ended up being a failed experiment in art and game rules. I guess that's how I'd sum it up.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that about the art, because from the clips that I saw, I actually kind of like it, but all the clips are in 480p, and I never got to play it myself, so I can't be a proper judge. I wish I did get the chance to play it though, it looked really fun. But Gas is very similar, and we'll get to that soon. There were some very interesting things with Grid 12, like for example, there was a market system in Grid 12, is that right? Like a grand exchange?
You could do that, yes.
Yeah, wow. Was that tough to implement?
I would not say it was difficult to implement. I'm a professional programmer. I have a lot of schooling, and I've worked real jobs where I had to write real code. So coding is not that much of a problem for me, and it's particularly something like this, where I'm not interfacing with anybody else's anything. I just write, it's all my own code. That stuff's pretty easy for me. So I wouldn't say it was difficult to implement. Now, maybe a better question or a more profound one is, was it a good idea to have even built it in the first place? Did it make the game more fun? And, I'm not sure it even really made the game more fun. But, the idea was, like a stock exchange, you could buy and sell any loot items that you found in the game, you could buy and sell with other players. And I think there's systems like that in EVE Online and, among many other games now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I think makes the next game beautiful that we'll talk about soon, because it has a lack of that and it actually makes the game a bit more interesting. Grid 12 had dungeons and those sorts of things as well, is that right?
I believe that it did. Yeah, it had a few missions you could do solo or even co-op off on a different map, yes.
Yeah. Was there a realm close in Grid 12, similar to Gas and Realm?
It's been a really long time. I don't think we actually had a realm close. Did we do that?
Yeah.
Maybe we did. You know what? It's been so long. We never really got the player numbers up such that we had a lot of kind of high-end play. So, yeah.
I think I remember that you actually did have it. It's been a while since I did a lot of research on that video that you saw with all the realm likes packed into one video.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Grid 12.
That was a great video.
Oh, thank you. Grid 12 was a really tough one to research for because it is kind of a relic of the past and there's not too much information on it, but I love that website that you have that compiles like all of the classes. That's really interesting.
That was not done by me. That was done by my other friend Amit, who did the original maps for Realm of the Mad God back in the day. All of those maps that are still in the game, they're just about to replace them. He did all of those.
Do you know when exactly you decided to cancel Grid 12? I know it was because you were scared that Flash wasn't going to last too long and your prediction was correct.
Yeah, that was in summer of 2015. So I'd been experimenting with that game for 3 years at that point. And, it had never really developed an audience. Then with the oncoming Flash apocalypse that was about to take over all Flash games, I decided to pull the plug. And, frankly, I probably should have done it a little earlier. If you're trying to innovate, really you ought to be doing lots of experiments and giving up on them when it's clear that they're not going to work. And I suppose that we did do a lot of rule changes in Grid 12. So experimented with a lot of different rules, but in the end it was determined that, I need to work on something else, do some different project.
Perfect. Well, right now you're working on a game called Galactic Assault Squad, which is very similar to Grid 12. It's another Realm-like game where you play as a tank and just shoot everything, basically. It was like returning to Grid 12 almost, or the very first game. Keep forgetting the name.
Steel Chaos. Yeah,
Steel Chaos. Okay. I just have to remember that second part. What brought you to making another tank-based game after so long?
Well, I guess it's kind of a theme with me, make those browser MMO tank games. Although tanks are just pieces of equipment, right? They're just metal. Some would argue that makes them difficult to fall in love with, and I get that. That's fine. There's no face on a tank. It's not a person. Some say that tanks are a pretty lousy thing to make an MMO out of. And so I guess, again, wanting to do the opposite of the conventional wisdom, I guess it's a thing I'm always drawn to.
Who are you working on Gas with? Is there anyone that you're working on Gas currently that you were working with Realm in the past?
I'm the only full-time person on Galactic Assault Squad. I occasionally work with Amit, the same Amit who did all of the maps from Realm of the Mad God. He is acting as a technical consultant for Gas, which means, like I say, I'm an engineer. I know how to write code, but sometimes it's good to have somebody to talk to about some of the more hairy issues, and he is a fantastic resource for that and a good friend, and I've been working with him on and off for a lot of years, and he brings a lot to the project. And then the other major collaborator that I have right now is Fiffle, who is a figure from the long past of Realm of the Mad God. I only met him a couple of years ago, but he did some pretty famous DPS calculators for the Realm community a long time ago.
Yes, I used to use that all the time.
That's right. And then he was hired and worked for Deca. He was hired by Deca and worked for them for several years, and he designed, among other things, the Samurai class. That's his work.
Oh, wow, yeah, that's amazing. And I remember he might have even did some work for Kabam, because I remember seeing an item called Esben Staff, and it actually had his name on it for the longest time.
Right. So anyway, he's been active in the Realm community for a very long time, and so I met him a couple of years ago, and he does some part-time design work for Galactic Assault Squad, designing, weapons and ships and enemies, and also recently has done some audio work, which we've been really pleased with. He did all the sounds for the Yeti, which I think came out really nice. That's the latest drivable tank in Galactic Assault Squad.
I didn't get to play that one yet. I'm meaning to do at least one more stream. The game's so much fun, but haven't got to play the Yeti yet. I had heard it's a lot of fun though, and it's really strong.
Well,
I do love the sounds in that game though. It's so addictive.
thank you.
What brought the changes between Grid 12 and Gas? Like, for example, you did mention the art, so we won't dwell on that too much. But another big difference is, like, the movement. In Grid 12, the tanks were more, like, rigid and slow, and, like, it felt like all movements were more, how can I call it? Just, like, exact. But then with Gas, you're, like, sliding everywhere, and you're always moving. What brought that difference?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. So when I was in the original, earliest stages of designing Galactic Assault Squad, I experimented with lots and lots of different movement schemes, including, some that are more like Realm, where you just kind of go up, down, left, right, just WASD, very Realm-like, super precise, and some more like Grid 12, where you're driving a tank. You have forward, back, turn left, turn right. I tried some with a camera lock to the tank, so if I rotate to the left, the whole world swirls to the right. That gives me seasickness. I can't do it. So I've wanted to make that control scheme work for a long time, but I just can't do it. Anyway, so I experimented with so many different movement schemes, but the one that I loved more than any other took me back to when I was a kid playing Asteroids in the arcade. And so you're not so much driving a tank as you're driving a hover tank. You have momentum. You move forward with your thrusters and you keep going when you let the button off, and you can slide left and right. And it opens up a lot of, in my opinion, pretty creative opportunities for skill expression. Once you get good at this control scheme, there's definitely a difference between someone who's brand new at it and somebody who has played with it for a while. And I think that's kind of an interesting direction to go for this game, to reward developed skill.
That is definitely true, because I'm probably about like 30 to 50 hours in, and I feel like I'm still learning the controls. But I would love to see someone with like 100 or maybe more hours in, because I'm sure they've got it down pat. Was there any major lessons that you learned while developing Realm and Grid 12 that made developing Gas a lot easier?
Certainly I have grown as a programmer during that time. I write so much code, I don't even remember the code that I write. I fix so many bugs, I don't even remember them. It's a thing that I'm much, much better at. So there's that, but I wouldn't say that's a really big lesson. One of the most important ones, and that was difficult for me as an engineer to learn, is listening to people. Game development, it's really kind of, you're trying to build a piece of art. You're trying to take a piece of yourself and put it into a tangible expression to try to bring other people joy. And, it's very easy to make it all about yourself. I have these ideas. I want to get them into the game is going to be the way I like it. And if you don't like it, well, I don't care what you think. You can go away. It's easy to fall into that trap. Certainly I have in the past. And it's definitely easy to fall into that trap when you're doing all of your development out in the open. You release it every week and everyone can play it. And the game is always in an unfinished state and everything is out there for other people to see. It's easy to see a piece of bad feedback. If someone says they don't like something, it's easy to just dismiss that person. Like, how dare you not like the thing that I'm trying to make? But one of the things I've learned is that it's very important to listen to people. You don't have to do what people say. You don't have to assume that everybody is correct in everything they say or do what they say, but it's important to listen. When someone takes the time to evaluate the thing that you're working on and give you their honest impression of what they think about it, there's important information there. And if you ignore that for the reasons of your own ego, that's a bad mistake. And I would say that's a lesson that I have learned.
Great, you answered my next question, which was about any major difficulties between developing Gas and Realm. Was there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Well, I got to say, innovation is hard. It's difficult to come up with some new ideas and try to get them to see whether they're fun. It takes a long time to write code. It takes a long time to get ideas into a form where people can try them. And it's one thing to have ideas. Ideas are a dime a dozen, but it's hard to get them into the game. And I feel like I personally got lucky with Realm of the Mad God because so many of the things were handed to me. An amazing set of sprites that, that was just an incredible piece of graphics that inspired so much of the design of the game. And then to have Alex just kind of come up with the game design, that made a lot of things much more easy, to have those things kind of handed to me. And so one of the things that I find difficult is doing those things all by myself, coming up with new ideas and then trying them out and, having them fail over and over again. This is how we get new things, right? Is by trying things and having them not work and then taking the lessons we learn from that and trying again. That is definitely a difficult thing for me to do personally, right? Like I can write code, I just got to keep at it. And this is what I do. I keep plugging away.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned that there were some great advantages that made Realm so popular. I think one of those was the fact that it was on browser, it was free, it was just so easy for people to just jump into. But nowadays, there's so many games that are free. Like, the amount of choice that people have is so crazy. I'd never imagined it 10 years ago. And yeah, that's definitely one of the advantages that Realm had in the past. You decided to put Galactic Assault Squad on browser as well. What led you to that decision?
Honestly, it's the exact same thing. I want to make it as easy, as friction frictionless as possible for people to try my game. And if you have to go to the Steam page and download it, and you got to log into the thing, when you click the game, it's like, no, sorry, you need an update. All of that friction makes it harder for people to try the game. If I can just say, go to gasgame.net, and then people are trying the game instantly, that's an amazing power that I think a lot of people forget. Now, web development comes with its own challenges, but that is the friction-free ease of being able to try the game with no effort at all. That's the reason.
Yeah, literally take 2 seconds. The world of Galactic Assault Squad at the moment is quite desolate. It's not too much of a surprise because the game is in alpha, is that right?
Well, whatever. I mean, it's constantly in development, right?
Yeah,
it's never going to be done.
And, yeah. And right now there is like teleport beacons, which is something Realm's getting added soon. And there's some roads. Those like the main defining factors to the map. Do you have any other plans of something that you might add to the map? Because I know that Rid 12 had like its own town. Do you have any plans for anything like that?
I wouldn't say that I have plans for a town in the map. I agree with you that the maps are a little lame at the moment, but I can tell you some of our map plans. One of them is that we want to have multiple maps. Like right now, you're on planet Quagmire. It's a swamp planet, and that's one of the reasons everything's so drab in a lot of the areas is that it's a festering swamp. But I'm hoping to add more maps, so there's that. I think it would be really great to have more events, things that you can come across, things that you can discover, things that on this iteration of the map are different from the last time you played on it. So more procedural generation. I think those things would be great, but I do not have any specific plans to do that right now just because I'm just the one guy and I have a little help and we just have so much more other stuff that we're working on right now.
Yeah, definitely. And something similar to what you're talking about is dungeons. Do you have any plans to add dungeons to Galactic Assault Squad anytime?
We do have support in the game for other maps. Like for example, there's a tutorial which takes place on a separate map, and there's a squad HQ. If you join one of the squads, you can go to see that. That's, I have not developed that in a while, and, it's partly finished. But the point is, yes, we do have the capability to put in dungeons. And I think one of the first places I might look at doing it is in the big faction boss fight. So right now, once you've, as to put it in realm terms, once you've closed the realm, then the big bad guy, the faction boss, will come out. That's either Commander Carcass or Lord Protector Cromwell. Right now, that guy is fought kind of in a battlefield at the very top end of the map in the hard zone. But you could imagine putting that guy into his own dungeon. The reason to do that would be in the current fight, if you make a mistake and you're low on HPs, you can always teleport back to the beginning, heal up, and then 10 seconds later jump back into the fight. So we could prevent that by putting him in his own dungeon so that if you have to duck out, then you can't get back.
Yeah, I would be stuffed if that was the case.
So many of us would be, right? It would make the fight a lot more challenging.
Yeah, definitely, and really interesting. And that is the hardest boss right now, as well as the bosses on the very northern road. Do you have any plans for any other content that might be even more difficult than that? Because it seems like some people are already able to solo that. I am nowhere close to even being able to do that in a small group.
I would love to have as much content as possible for every type of player. So I'm not going to say, no, we're never going to see any content harder than that. But that's not really the focus right now. Right now, the focus is on making the game wider as opposed to deeper. That is, we're still trying to build an audience. There's only a few people that are playing at any given time right now. At least to my analysis, the way to grow that base is to make sure that our low and middle end content is up to par. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time at this stage working on a lot of super deep high-end content that's only going to benefit a few of the most dedicated players. There's definitely a time and a place for that, but I think that right now, while we're still trying to find our audience, I want to make sure that the rule set is good, and I've been getting some reports of bugs and stuff. I want to make sure those are all squashed down, and I want to make sure the tutorial is good and we have high quality sounds in the places we need to have them, etc. That sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm even surprised that there's bugs, because you're doing such a great job so far. I didn't experience any issues like that in all the time I've played.
Right. The bug reports that I'm getting that concern me the most are things like that I suspect they're things for browsers. Like if I play in Chrome on this one computer using Windows 11.2 or whatever, things that are very difficult for me to reproduce, those are the ones that concern me.
Yeah, I think I actually had that issue myself, and I think the plugins are the things that cause that most of the time. Maybe. I'm just guessing, because I don't use plugins on Firefox and it works perfectly there, and it does get in the way of other websites. Do you have any plans for maybe extending the view range of the game, so it could be more in a full screen mode?
I've heard this comment from other players in the past that the game seems a little too zoomed in. It's something that I take that feedback seriously. There are a few technical issues that make it difficult to change the to zoom right now, and that's on me. That's, bad programming. This particular issue is more difficult than I want it to be to address. I hear that feedback, and, I take it seriously. It's a little more technically challenging than I want it to be to do experiments with that. And so I've kind of backburnered doing experiments with that, but it's something I would definitely need to look at in the future.
Yeah, I think Realm also has that issue with its HUD currently. I don't know if it could even change its HUD at all, because I think it's like fixed into the code, right, for it to be like
maybe,
that.
But that's an all new client, right? So they rewrote that whole thing. I don't think they just took the Flash client and ran it through a translator, or did they? I don't know how they did the port.
I'm not sure. sure.
If they rewrote it from scratch, then hopefully it's up to modern standards and they should be able to change stuff.
Yeah, I love the shift that you guys made to Galactic Assault Squad. Previously, I'm not sure if you had a vault in Galactic Assault Squad before, but it sounded like you might have been planning on it. But now it's more of a permanent PPE mode, which is basically like you can't stash your gear anywhere, so that when you do die, you can't just equip the top gear again. So you're always starting fresh every single time, and it makes it feel more like a roguelike game. What made you decide on doing that sort of game design?
So let me clarify. Yes, we did have a vault in Galactic Assault Squad, and that was actually kind of the main gameplay before. Well, I mean, the gameplay is you blow stuff up, right? But the main goal of the game was to expand your vault by buying more vault slots using in-game credits, and then stashing the best gear that you find, and thereby becoming wealthy and rich. That way, if you did die, you could equip stuff out of your vault, and so helps you recover from a death. So you got that exactly right. What made the change is one day I died, and I just got some good stuff out of my vault, put it on my tank, and I'm like, this is really boring. I didn't lose anything. I could die 3 times and it would be like that. And so now, I go back to the exact same areas and farm the exact same really good gear to fill up 4 empty spaces in my vault now. I just kind of had a moment of clarity, and I think that so far the changes are really very good. I eliminated the vault. It is just gone. And so now all of your progression has to happen on a given life of a given tank. So you can't farm stuff for your other tanks, and there's no place to store stuff between lives. You have a limited lifespan of your tank. You can drive until you get 100 boss kills, and then you have to give up your tank. So you have a limited amount of time you can keep your tank, and you can only equip the stuff that you find during that run. And in my opinion, it's made the game 100 times more fun.
I agree, because with Realm of the Mad God, I was getting definitely bored of it in the last 2 years. And I know you saw one of my recent videos about the hardcore player experience, where I forced myself to not carry anything with me. Ever since I started doing that, my fun in Realm skyrocketed.
Right.
It's great that you did that for Gus.
Yeah, all of the changes that I've made since the beginning of the year this year have been making Galactic Assault Squad more and more like a roguelike. Really what I'm trying to do is make an MMO roguelike. Maybe the first one. I don't know. Do any of those exist? The idea is it's like playing a roguelike. You have a run. It's a run-based game. But you play your run in a world with lots of other people that are also in different stages in their runs, and you play together. You help each other. It's a roguelike that you can play in a world with other people at the same time. That's what it's turning into, and I want to see if it works.
To answer, you probably are the first one to do that, because Realm is yet to even add a temporary mode. It would be cool if they even had the option of a PPE mode, or whatever you'd call it. I'd say you guys are definitely the first, and I know Born Again is doing something similar as well. And I remember when doing previous research for that previous video, the Realm-like video, I remember learning that there was at least 20 different tanks in Grid 12, which is a lot, especially compared to Galactic Assault Squad, which has, I think, 7 or 8 now, or maybe 9. Can gas players expect that many tanks in the modern rendition of your tank game?
We have 8 tanks now. Just released the Yeti. I think it's 8. Anyway, I would love to have 20 different tanks in Galactic Assault Squad. I would love to have 100. I think it would be great. The criteria for me, though, is that each one needs to have its own reason to live. So we just introduced the Yeti. I feel like it's a fairly well-designed tank in that it has a passive power that makes it unique among all tanks. That is, it does a lot of extra damage to any enemies that are frozen or chilled. And then all of its abilities, all of its triggers, freeze or chill the enemies. That makes its playstyle very different from all of the other tanks. It has its own reason to live. So I would love to have tons and tons and tons of playable tank classes, but each one needs to have a reason to live.
Yeah, that's so cool. I still need to get to playing Yeti. It does sound like the funnest one. It would be interesting to see you add more element-based tanks, like a fire one that does maybe damage over time. But I love that all of the tanks look different as well. So I think that's something that you'd want going forward as well. Is that right?
Oh yeah, for sure. You want them to look
yeah.
distinct. For sure.
Do you plan to monetize gas? And if you do plan on that, how do you plan on doing so?
I would say that before the game has an audience, then plans or discussion of monetization is somewhat premature. The goal right now is to determine whether the rules and the art and the play style and all of that are going to attract an audience. And so the goal right now is to try to build the audience. Once the audience is built, then yes, I think it definitely makes sense to try to monetize, because just like Realm, I'm trying to make something that can last for a long time. And that's the way games last for a long time, right? Is they need to be able to support themselves. So I have not settled on exact plans for monetization, but one idea is that I could sell cosmetic items. So, that's a pretty obvious one. And that's one of the reasons that I have so far held off on adding any cosmetic items into the game, is that I thought it might be nice to save them for, some future monetization, but only after we have developed an audience, if we're going to.
It's always a great idea because it doesn't negatively impact the game. And is there anything really exciting that your fans can expect in the future of Galactic Assault Squad? Something they can get hyped for?
Well, I don't like to give away plans too early because, like I say, this whole thing is highly experimental. And when ideas change, I need to have the flexibility to change that stuff. But what I can say is that we're working on adding more stuff. So we have currently 2 factions. I would like to add more factions. We have 1 map. I would like to add more maps. One cool thing about that is that what we'll eventually have is, when you play the game, you will be fighting whatever faction has been chosen on whatever map has been chosen. So if we have 4 factions and we have 10 maps, then that's 4 times 10 different combinations that you can get when you play the game.
Do you have any vague plans for how planets will be different other than the appearance?
Oh, yeah. So on Planet Quagmire right now, there are some native fauna. Actually, in the game, they're an invasive exospecies of frogs. That the frogs live in the swamp, right? And we also have the bogweeds. Those are the plants that pop up and shoot you. So those guys, you'll only see them on Quagmire. So if you go to another planet, say a desert planet, you wouldn't have any frogs and bogweeds there. You might have scorpions or spiders or evil cactuses that shoot thorns at you or something like that, right? So the challenges will be different. That's something you can definitely look forward to. And then, when I say more, I also mean, not just factions and planets, but more playable tank classes, more items, more symbiotes, which are the power-ups that you get, which largely drive your build, and then more roguelike mechanics. I would say that we are working on more of everything.
Oh, that's so exciting. Yeah. I'm sure that will get people hyped up. Well, thank you so much for your time. If you made it this far, why not give the game a try? You literally just have to type gasgame.net into your browser. There will be a Discord link below for the Gas Game community. Rob's extremely active there. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any of your questions because I basically see him answer anyone that pops up. But thank you so much for your time.
Hey, you're very welcome. This was a lot of fun.
Was there anything else that you'd like to add for the audience?
Yeah, definitely come try it out and let me know what you think. Like I say, I take feedback very seriously, and especially for new players. You can only be a new player one time. That new player feedback is so important.
Yeah, definitely. I think I still play that game like a new player since I'm still trying to get used to the controls. But guys, if you made it this far, let's troll the hell out of the people that didn't. Type in the comments how excited you are for Realm of the Mad God 2 to come out. And also, if you enjoyed this, please leave a like, comment on what you think, support me on Patreon if you like. And yeah, if you guys did like this, I'll make sure to do more, because I'm well connected to a lot of people that make games similar to this, and I'm also keen to talk to other Realm creators about interesting topics. Appreciate you guys big time. Peace.